Hello, I'm Dr. Michael Martin, and I'm here to talk to you about a subject that I hope you will find very interesting and that will influence you personally and professionally. I want to share my slide presentation with you, and let me bring my slides up now. Should be able to see my screen there. And my presentation today is entitled Red Meat, Better Off Without It. And I'm Dr. Mike Martin again. I'm with the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the University of California, San Francisco. I started a group called Physicians Against Red Meat, and I'm the president of that group. I'm also the president of a group called Physicians for Social Responsibility. Physicians for Social Responsibility was founded in 1961, so it's been around a long time, very well-regarded organization within physician circles and nationally. It addresses primarily climate change and the risk of nuclear war. It won the Nobel Prize in 1985 for its work trying to prevent nuclear war. So it's a very good and distinguished organization, Washington, D.C. based nonprofit group. First, I want to start off with a disclaimer of sorts. My disclaimer is that I'm only the messenger. I take no pleasure in telling you that something you have enjoyed probably for much of your life, red meat, is really not that good for you, and it's not that good for the world. I grew up on eating red meat, and so I take no pleasure in bringing this message to you, but it's a message we all need to understand and hear, and so I'm the messenger of this important information on red meat. Key point number one that I want to make with this presentation is that red meat is harmful to our health and our planet's health. Second key point that I want to make is among meats, red meat is an outlier and therefore an easy target for action. Red meat is way an outlier in terms of contributing to greenhouse gases and causing environmental problems for our world. So based on those two things, I come to point three, which is that if red meat is harmful to our health and harmful to our planet's health, and it's an outlier among meats, then our institutions and entities should not be serving red meat. Why would we want to serve something that's harmful to our health and our planet's health? It just doesn't make any sense. One of my goals today is to influence your beliefs and your habits regarding red meat. So I want to make this somewhat personal to you as an individual, and I want to influence what you believe and your habits regarding red meat. Influence your beliefs, your recognition that red meat is harmful to our health and our planet's health. And influence your habits, your dietary habits personally, what you purchase when you go to the store or what you order when you go to a restaurant, and your persuasion habits. And by that, I mean what you say to other people regarding red meat. You're all very influential people, and others look up to you. And if you say something about particular food, like red meat, other people will listen. So I want to influence your persuasion habits. Let's start with some definitions. What is red meat? How would you define it? I ask that of everyone to think for a moment about how you would define red meat. I've made it very simple for you and something you can remember very easily. That is 4 legs. Any animal that has 4 legs is an animal that contributes to red meat. So these 3 animals, the cow, the sheep, the pig, the goats could be added in here. It's all red meat. What things are not red meat? Well, these only have 2 legs, so they're not red meat. And this fish doesn't have any legs, so it also is not red meat. So that's an easy way to remember what we're talking about when we talk about red meat. The second definition I want to get across is processed red meat versus unprocessed red meat. And processed red meat is a meat that is much more harmful and in studies has been shown to be more problematic than unprocessed red meat. None of it's good for us, but the processed red meat is really much more of an issue. Unprocessed red meat, the meat that is not as bad as processed red meat, is only meat that's cut, ground, mixed. So you can do something kind of physically with it, cut it, grind it, mix it, but you can't add anything to it. Processed red meats are meats that have had something added to it. They've been cured, they've been salted, they've been smoked, they had other chemicals added to them, other preservatives, and you'd be surprised at how many different compounds are added to processed red meats. Processed red meats include, unfortunately, many of those things which we all find very tasty and have grown up with: bacon, ham, sausage, salami, corned beef, jerky, canned meats. Those are all processed red meats. So first I want to talk about red meat and our health, and then I'll talk about red meat and our planet's health. And I want to talk about red meat and overall mortality. You know, you can, when you research something, you can find that a particular drug, for instance, might cause an increase in heart disease, but it also might prevent cancer. So overall, you might find that this drug is a good drug for overall mortality. And so when we look at overall mortality, we're kind of adding all the things together and saying, well, does this do us good or does it harm us in the long run? So what we're going to do is look at first overall mortality and how red meat relates to that. So we're going to look at all-cause mortality with each serving per day of processed red meat. Let's break that down. All-cause mortality. I already mentioned that. It's all causes. Each serving per day of red meat. So just one additional serving per day of red meat. And we're going to look at first processed red meat, and then we'll look at unprocessed red meat. So processed red meat, again, the ones that are most harmful to us. And we're going to use a technique called meta-analysis. It might look complicated, but it's really very simple. It's a study of studies. That is, it looks at what studies are out there in the literature. It combines them all together and comes up with a summary statistic and summary information. Here's how it's laid out. You can see all these different studies on the left side here. These are all individual studies that have been published in the medical literature, peer-reviewed and published over time. And you can see this vertical line here. This represents no risk line, relative risk, so to speak, of 1, which means no risk. If you have the results of this study, which are all represented by these boxes, if you have the results all on the left side of the line, then there's a reduced risk. So whatever you're looking at would cause a reduced risk rather than a harm. If you have a result like this, you would have an increased risk. The studies are all showing that there's an increased risk with this particular thing that you're studying. And this diamond at the bottom is the summary statistic, which shows how overall they come together and where the overall risk is. Now, if you have an answer like this with some studies on the left, some on the right, you'd say, probably it's not healthy or, helping or harming. It's the studies are all showing different things. So we'd say, well, there's probably no harm. And you can see this diamond here at the bottom. The summary statistic is right in the middle, right in that line. Okay, so let's look at all-cause mortality with each serving per day of processed red meat. You can see that all of the results are on the left side, on the right side here, showing an increased risk from eating 1 additional serving per day of red meat. Now, I think the key thing here is that their studies are all very consistent. There's not a lot of question about whether red meat is harmful to our overall mortality. The results are all showing, the study results are all showing the same thing. Okay, well, let's look at another thing, which is all-cause mortality with each serving per day of total red meat. So before we were looking at processed red meat only, now we're looking at total red meat. Again, very consistent, the results all on one side, and you can see the diamond here. So I'm going to be showing you quite a series of research articles, but you'll kind of get the general idea of what I'm talking about. Here is a little different way of looking at things. This is a study called the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. It's a very large, very well-regarded study, carefully controlled and used for looking at many risk factors related to many diseases. You can see this increase with total servings per day of red meat. As you go from 1, 2, 3, 4, the risk goes up in a very uniform way. And it's very clear that there's harms from increased servings per day of red meat. Here's another study called the Nurses Health Professional Study, and it also looks at servings per day and increased risk, but you can see how close these lines are to each other. And I guess what I want to get across to you is that the consistency in this evidence about the harms of red meat. Okay, well, let's look at particular causes of mortality, and this is first cancer. We're going to look at cancer rates. This is something we're all very concerned about. So overall cancer mortality, what do we find when we look at cancer mortality with each serving per day of red meat, processed red meat? You have all the results on the right side of this line, increased risk. Let's look at red meat and colon cancer. Again, almost all the results being on the right side, showing an increased risk of colon cancer with higher intake of red meat. Red meat and breast cancer, something we're all concerned about, and that is one of the most common forms of cancer in our world. Results aren't quite as consistent, but you can see the summary statistic here shows that there is an overall increase in risk of breast cancer with intake of red meat. How about let's look at just other cancers. You can see at the bottom, breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, colorectal, gastric, esophageal, pancreas, liver, kidney, bladder, ovarian. Oh, so many different kinds of cancers. What do we find? If there's anything above the line here, it would show an increased risk. And we're looking at unprocessed and then processed for two different colors there. Look what we find. With each one of these cancers, there seems to be an increased risk of the cancer with higher consumption of red meat. So it's not only overall cancers, but the specific ones where we can show a link. Okay, well, let's get into some unusual things, red meat and stroke. Now, I'm not sure why red meat would cause an increased risk of stroke, but here it is. Again, almost all the studies on this one side showing an increased risk of stroke with higher consumption of red meat. Red meat and diabetes. Again, you'll see that the general tendency is for the studies to all be on the right side, and the summary statistic shows an increased risk here. Red meat and psychiatric disorders. Now, gosh, that's funny. Why would we have an increased risk of psychiatric disorders from people who eat a lot of red meat? We'll talk about that a little bit later, but look at the increased risk with mania, bipolar depression, major depression, and schizophrenia. This one, mania, here is particularly interesting and worrisome. This shows the increased risk of mania with cured red meats. Look at this, meat sticks, beef jerky, turkey jerky. They've radically increased the risk of mania when the consumption is high. And this is almost 5 times an increased risk of mania when there's a high red meat intake. So very, very interesting and very worrisome. Why is red meat harmful? Well, we have clear reasons why red meat would be harmful to our health. The saturated fats in red meat are problematic. Saturated fats harm our body in many ways. The particular kind of iron that is in red meat, that's heme iron, is problematic and causes inflammation in our bodies. The particular amino acids that red meat is made up of cause inflammation in our body and could be responsible for many of these effects that we see with various diseases. And the last thing here is nitrates. They add a lot of nitrates as preservatives to red meat, and they are very problematic and again cause inflammation in our body. That inflammation gets all throughout our system and causes harm to many different areas of our body. Okay, so that was red meat in our health. Let me talk about red meat in our planet's health. Why is red meat so harmful to our planet's health? Because it releases greenhouse gases. There's a huge amount of greenhouse gases associated with the production of red meat and bringing it to our table. Greenhouse gases from livestock include carbon dioxide, the most common greenhouse gas that we talk about, and one that's created from burning fossil fuels. But there's also methane that's created from cows that burp and fart. And it's a very prominent greenhouse gas. And there's nitrous oxide, which is caused from the degradation of manure. And these second two, methane and nitrous oxide, are much more powerful greenhouse gases than carbon dioxide, the most common one we talk about. This shows you how much more powerful they are than carbon dioxide. You can see if we assign 1x to carbon dioxide, then methane, each molecule of methane, is 86 times more powerful than carbon dioxide in terms of causing global warming. And nitrous oxide is almost 300 times more powerful than CO2 in terms of causing global warming. So you can see why these even small amounts of the methane and the nitrous oxide would be quite harmful to our world. This just shows the increase in those three gases, the carbon dioxide here, methane, nitrous oxide, over our history. And you can see how dramatically they've gone up in recent years. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is the group that you hear about. You read about it in the paper every 6 months or so, saying that, tipping point being, we're reaching a tipping point. We have to do something. It is the leading world body for assessing science related to climate change. It's composed of scientists from 66 countries and 124 authors and review editors. So it's a very prestigious group and most secure scientific body for telling us about climate change and where we are related to climate change. One of its key considerations is that one of the simplest and most effective steps to reducing greenhouse gas production is to reduce or eliminate red meat from our diet. So it's saying this is an extremely important thing for us all to do, and one of the ways which we all individually can help fight climate change. Red meat is really the low-hanging fruit in terms of fighting climate change. We can't all get electric vehicles right away. We can't all change our homes to put in heat pumps right away. We can't stop burning fossil fuels right away. But we can stop eating red meat. So it's the low-hanging fruit, something we can do quickly and something which will have a major impact. This just shows you the relative contribution of different foods to red meat, to climate change, and you can see what an outlier red meat is here, how much it is above the other foods contributing to greenhouse gases and climate change. The good news for all of you is you can see that oils, sweets, and condiments are low. And so we can all enjoy those donuts and other tasty foods like that without too much guilt, at least not related to climate change. Okay, red meat and world hunger. Red meat is a problem for world hunger. Why? It takes a lot of grain to make each pound of red meat. For beef, it's 7 pounds on average of grain to make a pound of red meat, and the range can be from 5 to 20. Some of the premium red meats, cuts of red meat, could be 20 pounds of red meat, of grain to make a pound of red meat. And pork is less, and chicken is less still. Land use, this is an amazing statistic. 4/5 of worldwide agricultural land is dedicated to feeding livestock. So 4/5 of all the agricultural land goes to feeding livestock, grazing, either grazing of livestock or making grains for livestock, soybeans, corn, to feed the livestock around the world. Red meat and water use. How much water does it take to make a pound of red meat. Water is becoming scarce all over the world, and particularly here in California, we're having a problem with water. Well, 1 pound of red meat takes this many showers, about 98 showers, to make a pound of red meat. So you can see the red meat is very problematic in terms of water scarcity around the world, and even here in California. Why didn't someone tell me this? Why didn't someone tell me that red meat is so harmful to my health, and red meat is so harmful to our planet's health? Well, the reason was that there are very great vested interests in confusing the situation and telling us that red meat may be good for our health. We need the iron in red meat. We need red meat to provide us with protein. Just like when the tobacco industry was trying to refute the findings that cigarettes are harmful to our health, they recruited doctors even to say that, well, it's not so bad. Red meat's not so bad. It may have some health benefits. There are vested interests trying to confuse us about the fact that red meat is actually quite harmful to our health, and definitely harmful to our world's health as well. So the key point here that I wanted to get across is that red meat is harmful to our health and our planet's health. Point 2, among meats, red meat is an outlier and therefore an easy target for action. And point 3 is that if red meat is harmful to our health, it's harmful to our planet's health, and it's an outlier among red meat, then institutions and entities, government entities, should not be serving red meat. Why would we want to serve red meat at our events, at our meetings? Why would an entity or a government institution want to serve red meat, something that's harmful to the health of those who are attending the event, something that's harmful to our planet's health? It doesn't make any sense. Very justifiable that we should stop serving red meat at these events. What's the action, which I'd really love to see, is to get city governments and other institutions to stop serving red meat. Why? But just because what I summarized, it's not good for our health and our planet's health. Why would we do it? Doesn't make any sense. Rationale for action. Why would a government entity serve food that's harmful to our health and our planet's health? Key consideration: plant-based foods should be substituted for red meat. We would not saying we should take out red meat and add chicken and fish. Really what we're saying is substitute plant-based foods, which are healthy for us, for red meat that we take out. This is a little resolution that we put together that can be used with any city. I won't go over the details. I made it intentionally small so you couldn't read it, but it's something that says a resolution by whatever city government, whereas the city of whatever is trying to reduce greenhouse gases. It goes through all the whereases, and therefore the next slide will show you what it is. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the city of whatever, therefore hereby adopts a resolution of red meat prohibition, where the city will prohibit the serving of red meat at sponsored events and meetings. And it will replace the red meat, with healthy and sustainable plant-based foods. So this resolution would not be targeted at, you can't serve red meat in cafeterias, or you can't where people are buying it themselves. You can't serve it at schools. No, it's not that. It says when the government entity is buying the food for an event, for a conference, it's not going to be red meat. Rationale for the approach: based on demonstrated health risks. Clearly, there are health risks. It's hard to argue against that. Why would we serve something that's not good for our health or our planet's health? It's an easy decision to make. It doesn't cost anything. Red meat is more expensive generally than other foods that can be substituted. And it can be done, a decision that could be made quite quickly. It's quick and painless to implement. It would lower cost rather than increase cost. It would garner media attention for the fact that the government is trying to do something to fight climate change and protect our health. It would serve as a crack in the dike for those wanting to move to more plant-based diets. That is, if we can start influencing what we're serving, then maybe we can move towards a plant-based diet overall. And it does not take away from the larger goal of eliminating all animal products, which in my mind is where we should be. Move away from red meat, move away from chicken, move away from fish, towards a healthy plant-based diet. And the first step would be a good one, would be to stop serving red meat. So those are all the rationales for the approach. Think of, and I want to compare it with passive smoking, okay? I want you to compare it with passive smoking. Think of a time when people could smoke on planes, at work, in restaurants, in bars, in hospitals. Well, how did we get there? I mean, it's almost inconceivable now when we look back that people could smoke on planes or at workplaces. How did we get there from here? Well, we highlighted the fact that there's a health risk for smoking around other people, and imposing risk on others is not reasonable. It's not reasonable for smokers to impose a risk on non-smokers, and so therefore government officials should not impose risks on people who are attending the conferences and other events that they give. It just doesn't make any sense. And just like with passive smoking, government needs to take action. I believe government needs to take action with not serving red meat at these events. Again, not good for the people who are there and not good for the world. Red meat is, in my mind, becoming the new tobacco. There are clear health risks associated with many different bodily systems, cancer, strokes, diabetes, it goes on. And in addition to that, red meat is not good for our planet. So that's the end. I thank you for inviting me to give you this presentation. I hope you will take these things into consideration and think of how we can all work together to move towards a time when we will not be serving something that is harmful to our health or our planet's health. Thank you very much.